Thank you very much, Deputy President. Well, as Senator Cash has just set out, there is a wall of money which goes from the union movement into the Labor Party's coffers. It's a wall of money which goes from the CFMEU, but also its favourite tentacles, the super funds, and that has enriched the Labor Party. It has paid for its campaigning capacity for many decades, and it has given it manpower on polling places and enormous internal power inside this building. And often it's unclear when Labor members and senators give speeches in this place whether they are speaking on behalf of the people that they seek to represent or do represent, or whether they are speaking on behalf of a union they used to work for. It is very unclear who, in fact, they are trying to work for in this building, which is a howling conflict of interest and something that I think is eating away at the qualities of the Labor Party and has been widely exposed by the media in this year. And I think we all are in debt to the Sydney Morning Herald for its extraordinarily good investigative work, which has exposed all these issues. And the reason that the Parliament is considering these matters now is because the media have done outstanding work in exposing this wrongdoing. So what is the transaction here? The transaction is the CFMEU, the CBus, the First Super, the Bus Q, all these organisations, they give their money through to the unions and Labor, and in return, what do they get? Well, they get preferable policy settings. They are paid off in policy. And one of the first actions of this government was to abolish the Building and Construction Commission. And as has been canvassed before, this is a Building and Construction Commission that was put in place by the Howard government because it was recognised that lawlessness was driving up costs and hurting Australians because of the inflated costs of building in this country. And then when the Gillard government comes along, they seek to replace the ABCC with another body, which is not as effective as the ABCC. The Turnbull government then seeks to legislate the ABCC. It is stymied by this Senate. A double dissolution election occurs, and the Turnbull government then legislates the ABCC with the support of One Nation and Darren Hinch and the Xenophon team. And thank goodness for the crossbench of the day standing up for the good qualities of this parliament, which has one pretty clear job, which is to look after the Australian people and to ensure that lawlessness is not something that is tolerated by the people in this building. So after 2,600 breaches of workplace laws and $24 million in penalties, the insertion of the CFMEU into enterprise agreements has a real consequence for the Australian people. At a time where the Labor Party has presided over the largest growth in immigration since the 1950s and a collapse in building construction, a collapse in house building. So the nexus between bringing people into the country and building houses is in a terrible state. And at that time, they have allowed the CFMEU to run rampant across building sites in this country, and the consequence of that is a 30% premium, a 30% tax on all apartment buildings and the like in this country, wherever the CFMEU has been allowed to do business. Now, this 30% tax means that housing for so many Australians, particularly apartment buildings, then becomes unaffordable. And for many Australians who are living in the cities, bigger cities on the East Coast perhaps, the entry point for them into the Australian dream is going to be an apartment. So the deliberate inflation of the apartment building costs by this government's actions is a disgrace, and it is hurting under 40s. And when you look at opinion polls and you look at surveys of under 40s in this country, they are very angry about the housing situation, which has got so much worse under this government. And they should be angry because the government is a government for vested interests, which is running a protection racket for their best friends, and they don't care They don't care. The Labor Party does not care that the Australian people have to pay a 30% premium on a new apartment building because of the CFMEU. They would rather help out their favourite vested interests than look after the welfare of younger Australians. Unions are more important than young people to this Labor Party. And that's where we find ourselves, Deputy President. Now, the lack of law and order has manifested in many places across our country. Now, in relation to the Harcoa Club in Sydney's eastern suburbs, this is a Jewish club which has been threatened by the CFMEU with pro-Palestinian protesters because of a dispute between Harcoa and its builder. And this is a sort of activity the CFMEU is prepared to undertake. It is prepared to go into communities that are already very much under stress and strain and threaten them with all sorts of different political and other measures, which is illuminating for this chamber to consider. The fact that you would threaten people who are already under siege with a particular form of sensitive protest in order to get an outcome. This has been canvassed again by the good work of the Sydney Morning Herald, which has been able to canvass these matters in detail in recent weeks.